last session, we learned about how we can deal with all NG for properties. In the NG for properties, we saw examples with index, how we can use odd, even. Same you can use even first and last. Yesterday I given one example for that. One more NG for properties, we have track by. We have a property track by. What is this track by? How it works? Let's see. Actually, to understand track by, first you should know how actual NG for works. Means how NG for is going to handle. Let's see one example for that. I will open. So let's start this project. NG so shopping. Okay. So meantime here I will show you and see. Actually, how this NG4 is going to render details. One small point I will show you. So suppose we have data here. Suppose we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Some records are present. We have 5 records in from API, from table, anywhere you may be accessing that. So this is the data we are having, some 5 records we are having. And these we are presenting by using NG4. So what this is the collection so that we have. That is the collection we have. And to present the collection in the UI, so we are using NG4. So we are using NG4 to read the collection and handle. So NG4 is used for reading. Now what is the nature here is LET item of collection. So the nature of collection here is when you are reading every item from the collection, it is presenting them here. So suppose it is doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All the 5 are presented. Now, when you do any modification in the source, that means suppose you have modified some 2. If you have modified 2, that modification need to be updated. Then this NG4 will perform all the 5 iterations again. It will perform all the 5 iterations again. So that is not good idea, right? It is not good. Suppose 1 million records are there, and in 1 million records, only 1 record modified, and you are loading 1 million again. That's not great idea. So then what is good is if you can update only the record that is changed. That means the iteration should not run for all items every time. The iteration should run only for the changed items. The iteration should run only when any item change. So that means you are loading this collection. Suppose we are loading this collection on a button. That means on a button click, we are loading that collection. So you clicked the button again. When you clicked the button again, so again it will iterate. You click second time, it will iterate again. So why you are iterating all items? Why you are iterating it again if there are no changes? That means once data is loaded and there are no changes, then no need to perform the iteration again. Iteration must be performed only when any change occurred. And iteration must be only where change occurred. Right? It should not iterate all items. It should iterate only the item which is changed. And that is handled by using a property track by. What track by will do is, whenever you ask for iteration, means you click this button again, then track by will verify, are there any changes in this data? If there are any changes in the data, then only it will do this iteration. If there are no changes, it will not perform that iteration. That's good. That means, as I already told you, many times people ask like, will you teach Ajax in Angular? Because they don't know about Angular. So Ajax is inbuilt with Angular. In every aspect of Angular, Ajax is working. Generally, what people think Ajax means interacting with API. General people knowledge is, they think that Ajax means interacting with API. That's their idea. They ask like that. That means if anybody asking, will you teach Ajax, means he is asking how to interact with APIs. Because people sometimes think that Ajax means only interacting with API. Ajax is not just interacting with API. Any asynchronous task in a application is managed by Ajax. Asynchronous task means entire content is not loaded, entire content is not submitted, only a portion of the content is loaded. So here also TrackBy is using Ajax. What TrackBy will do? It will identify, are there any changes in the data? If there are any changes in the data, then it will perform the iteration. So what is the problem if I don't use TrackBy in iteration? Every time iteration will run, and every time all items will iterate. But if I use TrackBy, iteration will happen only if there are any changes, and iteration will be only for the item where change happened. For that, we have to use that TrackBy. So let's see here. To understand this TrackBy, I will add a component here. You tried yesterday's exercise, huh? Able to achieve that task I asked? I will enable uploading of example in the classroom. You upload that example if you have done. Means you upload the source code. I will see. I asked you to try one exercise, na? Right? You have to try that, and if you have done successfully, then submit. I will check, right? Let's add one component here. So let's open ng generate component tracking demo. Skip test. Okay. Tracking. Okay. Now let's keep this component in the startup also. Fine. let's go to app module and tracking demo. Okay. And in index tracking demo. So that is working fine. Fine. So let's launch. So tracking demo working fine. Okay. Now let's go to the tracking demo. Just for example's sake, I will give here. In this, I'm adding some data. So let's add some data here. So products. So products is an any type array. In that I have some array of object. In that I have some name and some TV and some price. Just two details I am giving. And another some name and mobile and price. Okay. So 2-3 details we will keep here. That's enough. So name, suppose watch and some price. Okay. So these are the details we are having. Okay. Now I will use the same data here. You see, later we can do with iterations also, means API also. Here I am adding a method called update product. Okay. Update product is a method. In this, we are accessing this dot products, and in that the same data is there. Already it is declared. Same data is there. One more extra record I am adding. That means I am using name. So that is Nike casuals and the price, some price. Here I am defining this. You see, I am repeating the same data. But here only one change happened. Only one extra record added, right? So let's go to the TS file and present this data. I am just using div, okay, container fluid, and here we are having a table. So class table and table hover. Okay. Just I will add t head, tr, th. We have only name and price. And in the table body, I am using the row and ng for let item of collection is products. In the two cells, we are using one contains item dot name. Another cell contains item dot price. Okay, I'm not using track by as of now. I'm adding another button here at the top. Let's say update. So I'm using update. So on this update class btn primary, on this update button click. On this update button click, we will call update. What is the method? Update product. Update product method is called again. Now already it is loading the products. When I click update, it will load these products again. But one more extra is added into it. One more extra will be added into it. Let's see now here. So this is the data we are having. Let's inspect. We will go to inspect. Let me toggle this here. Yeah. So in this inspect, observe here we have body. In the body, this is the track demo component. In that we have container. In that we have a table. In the table body, you see these 3 rows now. In the 3 rows, I observe carefully these 3 rows here right side. When I click update button, observe these 3 rows. When I click update button, all 3 rows are generated again. One new also generated. 1/4 row came, but all 3 rows are generated. You click again update. Are there any modifications here? There are no more modification. Already modification done. But when I click update, it will generate that again. You click update again, it will generate again. That means the iteration is firing up again and again, even I don't do any changes. That means your ngFor is loading items, repeating items again and again, even no changes are happening. This is burden for application. 3-4 records, it's fine. But in reality, it will be millions of records. And you cannot keep all the millions of records loading. Right? That means when I click update, you can see again it is generating. It is generating. So this cannot happen. Then what you can do is, you can ask this iterator to verify any change happened or not. So for that, you have to use a function actually. We have to use a function. Here I will write a method called track change. This method, how it will identify track change? What this method can do is, it can access index number. Index number. It can access index number. And it can return the index number. Remember, index is the iterating item index number. It can return that iterating item index number. That means it will identify any item, any index changed or not. Any change occurred in the index or not. If any change occurred in the index, it will return that index number. It will tell the iterator that number 3 index changed. It will tell the iterator that number 4 index changed. It will tell the iterator that number 4, 10, 11 changed. It will return the index number. So we need a method which returns the index number. And now we have to write here the property that is track by. Remember, track by is a function pointer. Is a function pointer. You know what is the meaning of pointer. So function pointer means it uses a delegate mechanism. Right? Already you know function pointers, events, event arguments, all are function pointers. It is not function calling. It is not function calling. It is function pointer. It is not calling the function. It is pointing towards the function. If it is pointing toward the function, you have to write which function? Colon. We have to write the function name. Function name is, this is the function track change. That means I will use the function track change, not parenthesis. When you are using parenthesis, you are calling the function. When you are not using the parenthesis, you are pointing towards that function. That means now what happens here? When you are performing iteration, before performing iteration, this track by, what it will do is, it will use this function. What that function will do is, that function is actually returning the index number of changed item. That means automatically it can bind to the index. Remember, I am not passing anywhere index. What this track by can do is, track by can pick up the index of every item and it can send that index to this track change. That means track by is accessing the index of every iterating item and it is going to send that into this track change. If any index change happened, that index number will be returned. That means what this track change method will do, it will not return the every index number. It will return only the index where change occurred. That means what the track change is returning, it is returning the index of changed item. It is returning the index of changed item. Then iteration will be only on that item. Let's see. Now observe here. I will do one thing to verify button is clicked or not. I will put an alert for your confirmation. I will put an alert saying that update clicked. Okay. Now you see here. Now you see in the body track change, and see here in the table body, you see currently three rows are there. Observe very carefully. When I click on update, update clicked. I click OK. You will see only last row is added. We will do one more time update click. One more time I am clicking update click. Then it says update clicked. And I click OK. There is no iteration happening. There is no iteration happening. I click update again. Update is clicked. But there is no iteration happening. There is no iteration happening here. You saw previously, if I was not using track by, iteration was happening. It was generating the rows again and again. I hope you observed. The rows were generated every time. That means now what track change is doing? So the track change is identifying, is there any change? Do I need to iterate? So if there is no change, then no iterations. Iteration will not happen. So if there is change, then it will perform the iteration. Let's refresh one more time. When I refresh, 3 records are there. Let's go to the body. In the body, you see here we have a table body. Now 3 records are there. And when I click update, and only the last one is added. Only last one is added. And I click update again, and again it is not doing any update. So if any change occurred, then it is automatically going to identify the change and update the change. So it is always good to use track by when you are dealing with large amount of data which needs to reload again. So now you may ask, like, from where the data is reloaded, so or where data is present. Of course, data is temporarily maintained in buffer. I hope you know that in web applications, data is temporarily in cache. Am I right? Cache memory. So from there, it will access and it will use the data and it will save the round trip. So technically, so what is track by? So let's see the point. What is track by? So it is a function pointer. It is a function pointer. It uses delegate mechanism. It uses delegate mechanism, function pointer delegate mechanism. And here it can track changes. It can track changes in data. It can track changes in data by using index. Track changes in data by using index. And update changes. And update changes. Delegate means function pointer. I am saying now already. Delegate means function pointer. Function pointer, right? Function pointer, right? So it is data by using index and update only the item where change occurred, right? So iteration will be only for changed index references. That is what track by is. Right? Iteration will be for only changed index references. Right? What is advantage? So it will save round trips. I hope you'll know in web technologies what is a round trip. Round trip means every time connecting to server, accessing the data from the server and loading it from the server. How we can save the round trips? By keeping the data in the buffer for certain duration, so that whenever the same data is requested, it will not get from server, it will get from the buffer. So that is what round trip is, right? Even while working with your databases, server side technologies, you will come across with these round trips. Yeah. Suppose I hope you people have heard about connection pool, huh? Oracle, MySQL, SQL Server. When you are working with databases, have you heard about connection pooling? What is connection pooling in database? Right? What is connection pooling in database? What is the purpose of connection pooling in database? Why you need connection pooling? Connection pooling is nothing but it saves round trips. That means if you are frequently connecting to any data source, you can pull the connection. If any connection you pull, then it will save round trips. That means you don't need to go to server, connect every time. You can use the connection which is already loaded into memory, which will be faster in connecting. Generally, you will learn this in various databases. Actually, you see, you have control panel. In control panel, administrative tools. In administrative tools, you will find ODBC, right? ODBC data sources are there. In ODBC data sources, you see, so there is an option connection pooling. Right? In that connection pooling, this is connection pooling. Here you can add the connections actually. So see what it says. It says that connection pooling allows an application to reuse an open connection handle which saves round trips to server. So while working with web application, round trips are very common, right? That is a very common term in web application. You are learning Java, JSP, PHP, .NET, everywhere round trip is a very key concept. And developers need to save round trips. You should not do round trips every time. You have to save round trips. So that obviously you will learn in your server side technologies. So, but what is the concept of round trip? Simple. Round trip means every time connecting to server, fetching the data and using. Every click, every change, every time it is connecting. So if request is very frequently for the same data, it should not connect to server, keep the data in the memory, from the memory delivered to you. That means keep the data in your buffer, cache memory, and from there delivered to you. That saves round trips, right? That is general. So example is this, how we can use. I will give an example. Tracking demo.component.ts. In tracking demo component, this is the code we written. And tracking demo.component.ts HTML. This is the presentation we designed. That is the presentation we designed. So this is basically how ng-for works, right? We will use everywhere later in examples how to use ng-for and attributes. So finally, this all comes under the category of what are the directives. These are the summary I will give. This is related to what directives we learned. structural directives. And in the structural directives, we have ng if, we have ng switch, and we have ng for. And in this, some key things we learned about content projection. And when another is track by. These are the key points you need to understand in this concept. So in the Angular directives, we have structural directives: if, switch, for, with content projection and track by. Right. These are the major areas in interviews. Right. In interviews, they may ask about content projections, and we also learned dynamic templates. Dynamic templates. We learned about ng template, and we learned about ng container. So interview will be, in interviews, these terms will be regularly used. These are very regularly asked in structural directives especially. Next, important, after understanding the structural directives, we have attribute directives. In Angular, we have attribute directives. Attribute directives are nothing but, what is the role of structural directive? The role of structural directive is nothing but adding elements, removing elements, and repeating elements. Adding elements, that is done by using ngIf and ngSwitch. Repeating elements is done by ngFor. Structural directives are responsible for controlling the DOM structure by adding elements, by removing elements, and by iterating. That means repeating the elements. But what attribute directives will do is, attribute directives, they will not add or remove. They will not repeat. What they do is, attribute directive is used to extend HTML elements. Attribute directive is used to extend HTML elements. That means already HTML element is there. It is doing some work, and to that it will give more work. That means it makes the static HTML element, HTML DOM, into dynamic DOM. It will convert the HTML static element into dynamic. Once it is converted into dynamic, that means you can handle element dynamically. You can handle element dynamically. Handle element dynamically means changing its style and data. You can change its style, you can change its data dynamically by using these attribute directives. Already we learned Angular attribute directives. One directive already we learned. One Angular attribute directive is ng model. We discussed already. We used ng model. We have ng class. So we have ng style. These comes under the category of attribute directives. These are not going to add element or remove element or repeat element. They are going to extend element and make the element dynamic. So ng model, ng class, ng style, this comes under attribute directives. And already we learned ng model. What is the role of ng model? ng model role is nothing but, so what ng model will do is, it is used to configure HTML element as model in MVC, right? As model in MVC. What model in MVC can do? Model can handle the data, right? Model can handle the data dynamically. Model can handle the data dynamically. That means whatever data you entered in a element, the data can store, the data can update, the data can display by using what? NG model. So NG model can handle the data dynamically. So for handling data dynamically, we use this NG model, and it can use both one-way binding. Am I right? It can use one-way binding and two-way binding. Two-way binding. So it can work with two architectures, MVC as well as MVVM. Both we have seen, right? And no need to explain example. Already you saw an example. Suppose we have a text box. Input type is equal to text. How to make it dynamic? Through MVVM architecture, we use NG model, and it will have a name. So the name is suppose price, and here we have to define hash price is equal to NG model. That's how we need to configure. This is one-way technique. What is two-way binding technique? This is also two-way binding. This is MVVM. What is MVC architecture? Input type is equal to text. We have to use property binding and event binding. Right here we need to define price. That's it. Already we discussed this. Already we learned about this. We used it in example. Right. This is generally attribute directive. So what it is doing? Is it adding an element, or is it removing an element, or is it repeating element? It's not doing anything. It is just extending element. Already element is there. It is extending its functionality, making it dynamic. So the text box was static. The static text box is converted into dynamic, so that we can get the value and we can use the value. And already you learned this point. NG model configures an object, configures an model object that comprises of following properties. You know the properties. If you remembered, I told you it have properties like value, right? The properties like pristine, the property like dirty, the property like valid. I will tell you about those other properties later. We'll learn in validation, like invalid, like this. Like we have touched, so like we have untouched. All these comes under the properties of model object. In that already I showed you value. That means suppose how to syntactically access the price. Suppose I want to display the price. I cannot just use price, because what price will return? It will return an object. Price will return an object. So how we can access its data? We have to use price dot value. This is a value, right? Already we used NG model in different examples. So NG model is a directive. And what kind of directive? It is an attribute directive. And already you know NG model is a member of forms module. You know that. So forms module, it is defined in which library? Angular forms. You have to import from that. It is not directly available to use. You have to configure and import from there. This is NG model. Already we learned. Now another structural directive, attribute directive, we have NG class. NG class. Remember, when I am writing, I am giving N uppercase and C uppercase, but in the usage I am using N lowercase and C uppercase, camel case, because in the library it is built like that. In the library, every directive is built in a title case. Title case means every word first letter will be caps. But when you access, it will be in camel case. Its class name is in title case. Its access name is in camel case. That is a common thing. right? That is the reason we are defining in this way. ng class, what is the purpose of ng class? It's simple. ng class is nothing but it is used to bind a css class dynamically to element. It is used to bind a css class dynamically to element. What is the purpose of binding a css class dynamically to element? So the purpose is very simple, so that you can change the element appearance dynamically. You can change the element appearance dynamically. That means we don't want an element in the same way every time. It should change its appearance dynamically according to the situation. That we can do by using ng class. Let's see how it can use. So how to use this class we will see. So it is often known as class binding. Many people call this as class binding. Actually, this comes under structural directives and attribute directives, but people name it as class binding. Class binding is nothing but we are applying a CSS class dynamically to any element. Why you need to apply a CSS class dynamically to any element? Of course, we have to change the element dynamically, situation wise. For example, see, means how you can handle this. One small example we will see. Let's add a new component again. To understand this, ng generate component class demo. Skip this. Okay. Class binding demo. Okay. Yeah. I am just adding class binding demo. So let's keep this class binding demo. In the startup. Class binding demo. Okay. So class binding demo works fine. Okay. Let's go into the class binding. In the class binding, I am just giving here, means I will give you a real scenario actually. Real scenario is nothing but suppose we have class container fluid. Yeah. Here we are having a registration form, register user. And here we have a data list, data term, say user name. And this username text box, we have a text box. Input type is equal to text. Now this username is mandatory. Means it is mandatory. Later we will learn validations. Validations in a separate session we will discuss. So it is a big concept in separate session. Here situation, one small concept I am explaining. Now generally in HTML, how you can tell that it is valid? So what I will do here, I will make it dynamic now. So to make it dynamic so that Angular can use. To make it dynamic, you know what to do. We have to put a name as username. Okay. We need to put an ng model. We have to put a ID called username, which should refer to ng model. Now it becomes dynamic. Okay. Now I am giving here, it is becoming dynamic. Now what I am doing here is I am making it required. I am making it required. Required is a HTML attribute. You know that HTML5 have so many validation attributes. What are validation attributes? Min length, max length, required, pattern. So all these are attributes, validation attributes of HTML. HTML have this required attribute. Now Generally, if it is required, then I want to show that visually here. If it is required, I want to show that visually, that it should be in red color. That means if it is required, it should be in red color. If it is satisfied, it will be in green color. That means we need to change the appearance of this text box dynamically. That means the appearance of text box should change dynamically. If it is valid, one effect. If it is not valid, another effect. So how you can do that? That means how you can change the appearance of an element dynamically. So that means actually in the latest CSS, they provided some techniques. So I hope you learned CSS. In the latest CSS, you have validation pseudo classes. You learned na? Validation pseudo classes. In CSS, we have validation pseudo classes, like we have valid, we have invalid, we have required, we have optional, we have in range, we have out of range. These are all validation classes. CSS provides these validation classes. Through those validation classes, we can handle. But they are also limited because they are CSS classes. They can handle up to certain limit. But if there are multiple validations, then they cannot handle in a proper way. That's the reason we need to take help of JavaScript or jQuery or Angular like technologies. So already CSS is having these options, right? But they are not enough for handling multiple validations. So we need to change appearance of this text box. How you can change appearance of text box? So what I am doing here, so I am going to the CSS file. This is the CSS file. In the CSS file, I am adding valid style. I am adding a class called valid style. In that, I will give border as 2 pixel solid green color. And I will put a box shadow as 2 pixel, 3 pixel green. That is box shadow. This is valid style. I will use another class, invalid style. In invalid style, I am using border as 2 pixel solid red color. I am using box shadow 2 pixel, 3 pixel and red color. Now I need to apply any one of these to this element. How you can apply any one of these? Depending on situation, it should change. If condition matching, it should apply one effect, not matching another effect. That means dynamically, I need to apply these classes and change them. I need to dynamically apply the classes and change them. Then how you can handle that? So for that, we have to use this class binding technique. What ng class can do is, ng class can bind a CSS class. It can remove the class. It can add the class. It can change the class according to situation. Generally, by using class, you can apply a class name. For any element like this, you can apply a CSS class. But always it uses only this class. But now we can put a class in such a way, it will be changing according to situation. That means what is difference between class and ng class? So ng class can change class according to situation. Whereas class will use always same class. But ng class can change situation wise, which class you want, you can apply. So that is what the advantage of ng class. But how ng class can handle? Actually, ng class have three reference styles. First, I will show you them. ng class have three reference styles. You have a string, you have an array, and we have an object style. ng class can use three reference styles: string style, array style, and object. Generally, how the string style work? Actually, string is nothing but, in string style, we define like this. We put ng class. Here, we will put a single quote, and here we will define the class name. This is string. So generally, what is the purpose of this is, you can apply any specific class. You can apply any specific class. But this will allow only one. It will allow only one. If I want to allow multiple, then I can use array style. Array style means I can write ng class, and here I can define array reference. Array reference means you know. In that array reference, you can put class 1, you can put class 2. That means it will apply both. You can add multiple classes. This is array style. Now you have object reference. In object reference, we can write ng class here like this. What is the specialty of this object reference is, in this what you can do is, you can put class name and you can put true or false. You can put the class name and you can put true or false. That means you can turn on and off the classes. You can switch between classes. That means if condition satisfied, one set of classes will be working. If condition not satisfied, another set of classes will be working. You can change the classes by using which reference? Object. So object is best used every time. You can use string reference, you can use array reference, or you can use object. But in order to turn on and off the classes, object reference is good. String reference means only one at a time. And array reference means you can apply multiple. You can apply multiple. Object reference means through object reference, you can turn on and off the classes. Turn on and off the classes. See, now here I will go into this. First, I will show you directly. You see, I am using ng class for the text box, and I am applying a string reference. In string reference, what I am doing, I am using class name. What is the class name? Valid style. If I use the class valid style, then it will apply that class. Then always it is same, right? Always it is same. We don't want like that. So then if you want more than one, then you can use array reference. But we don't want like that. We want it to change. Okay. If you want to change, then you have to use an object reference. In object reference, here we are writing valid style. Okay. Now tell me when to apply this valid style. That means we have to put a colon. When to apply this valid style? It uses a Boolean value. It uses a Boolean value. The valid style should be applied when text box is valid. How you know text box is valid or not? How you know text box is valid or not? Already you saw here. Right? ng model have a property called valid. What this property will do, it will return whether it is valid or not. Currently, which validation we are using? Currently, we are using required validation. It will verify that. You don't need to write any logic for that. Just valid will verify whether it is valid or not. That means you see, currently which validation we are using? Required. So for which control we are using? Username. So whether username required satisfied or not, it will verify. Here we have to just access username dot valid. What username dot valid will do? It will return true or false. It will return true or false. That means if username is valid, this valid style will apply. Let's apply another one. second one, what is it? Invalid style. So it should apply when username is invalid. That's what we are giving here. Now you can see that its appearance is red now. How come it is red? Because currently it is using this validation required. Am I right? Required means there must be some value. If there is no value, that means it will return invalid. If it returns invalid, which class will be applied? Invalid style class will be applied. Now see here, click inside and start typing. Now it is green color. That means it is changing its appearance. And I remove it, then it will be in red color. That means it is verifying whether it is valid or invalid. You can use any validations, any type of validation. For example, in HTML you learned validation is not just required. You can also use min length. I am giving min length validation for. I am giving a pattern. You learned HTML have pattern. In pattern, I am giving a-z. So, and 4 comma 10. That means it indicates only uppercase 4 to 10. You learned how to write patterns in HTML. Now the point is, all three should satisfy. If anything problem, that means it will return invalid. If it is invalid, then automatically it will apply this style. It will apply that style. Now you see here, I am defining here. Now this is invalid. I will enter some David. It is still invalid. You can see still it is red color. Even I satisfied required, it is still red color because it should satisfy minimum 4 characters. But still it is red color because it should satisfy 4 uppercase letters. That means David. Now it is okay. If any problem is there, suppose I am using a small letter, then again it is red because it will allow only uppercase letters as per the validation you given. And you can see it will validate only that. And if there are minimum 3 characters, it is invalid again. So minimum it should have 4 characters, then it is satisfied. So why you need a class binding? We need class binding because we need to change the appearance of element dynamic. Later you will learn how to keep messages. That means we can put message, name required, name min length is not satisfied. So main name should be uppercase only. That is later in validations we will see that. But what is the reason? What is the purpose of this class binding? Purpose of class binding is you can apply a CSS class dynamically. You can change entire appearance. Not only this. This is one point. This is one point. Let's do another. For example, so we are creating another header. I will give login. Okay, this example first I will post this here. And here nothing to do in our TS file. Here everything is done in the CSS. I will copy this. First I will give you this example. In this example, this is a class binding dot component dot CSS. In CSS we have this code class binding dot component dot HTML. In HTML we have this one. You can give any name for component. Yeah, this is option. Our intention is dynamically applying. Okay, let's do one more here. So I'm removing this part. Okay, I'm cleaning up this CSS. Okay, and here I'm creating a div. So class as deflex and justify content center. Justify content center, align items center, align items center. Okay, I will give style height is equal to some 500 or 500 pixel. Okay, and inside this I am designing a form. In this form, so I will put a header. So suppose user login. Okay. And in the form, we just put a data list, data term, user ID, data definition, input type is equal to text. Just roughly another data term, password, and data definition, input type is equal to password. And here we have a button. So class btn and btn some primary or something like this I define. Now here I will put here a container above and a class as a form switch I am giving here, and I will put a checkbox. Input type is equal to checkbox and class as form check input. And here I will put as dark mode like this I am giving. Now this is the form design, and button have the text as login, and here we are defining W100. So this is the form, and here we have form apply the class as some border, and border some 2. So border as dark or like this I am defining. So and we have rounded and rounded as 2 like this, and we will put some padding as the 2. Okay, that will be like this. This is the form. Now the concept is simple. I hope you already understood what should happen here. When I click dark mode, this entire form should change into dark. That means you can turn on the dark mode, then it should be complete dark mode. Background black, foreground white, everything should be into dark mode. Again, you can turn on and you can turn off the dark mode. That means it depends. It depends on this switch, how you are defining. Now, we need to change the appearance of the form dynamically. So I'm creating, let's go to the class I'm using. So dark mode, that is the class. This dark mode class is having background color as black, and it is having color as white. Like this we are defining. So when you are defining the dark mode, we are configuring in this. Just roughly only 2 options I given. Now this dark mode depends on this checkbox. And you know that checkbox will return a Boolean value, true or false. That means here we need to make this checkbox dynamically now. To make the checkbox dynamically, we have to use the option ng first name. Name is equal to theme, right? So theme false. Theme is having true or false. Dark mode theme, and here we will put ng model, and we will put hash theme is equal to ng model. So we are configuring this. That means theme will get checkbox value. Checkbox value means true or false, checked or not. And see here, now what we are doing is we are applying this for this form. So form is using ng class, and we will put here, so the class name is dark mode. Dark mode depends on this theme. Theme contains true or false. Dark mode depends on the theme. That means it contains true or false. So this is the option. That means theme is a checkbox value. And we are just applying that by using an object mode here. Now you can see it will be on and off. It should change. By default, only one color it is applied. What is the color? It is this theme. You know, it is an object now. We have to get its value. What is that value? Theme value is nothing but it is true or false. You turn on this, then dark mode will come. And you turn off this, then it will be again normal. You can change the appearance of complete. That means you can change button appearance, you can change separate appearances. If you want to change button appearance, then again, you have to put here for button also, you need a class binding. You can use ng class. And which class it should apply? So here I will use another option as, so there is a class called btn dark. btn dark. It should apply based on theme value. Based on theme value, it should apply. That means dynamically we are applying. You can see button also changes. That means for button also we are applying that. Remember, this btn dark is not our own class. It is Bootstrap. Bootstrap have ready-made classes. Those also you can apply. You can apply the ready-made Bootstrap classes, or you can apply your own classes. So that means now what we are doing, we are changing the appearance dynamically for this. That means the entire appearance is changed dynamically for that control. That's done by using this. Right? Just we created a theme. So dark mode is a theme. Whether to apply the theme or not, that depends on checkbox. Checkbox is by default false. You can keep checked property. If I keep checked property, checked is by default true. So if I give checked property true, I need to apply that property to that theme. That we need to do by using dynamic. This is not dynamic now. This is only static. How do we check dynamically? By using this theme reference, we can do that. That I will show you. Two-way binding you have to use for that. For that you have to use ng model as a binding reference. ng model as binding reference. That means what you do, you have to put a reference for in the TS file, and through that we have to access. Currently we are not doing that. We are not using this TS file. Just we are using MVVM approach. In MVVM approach, directly you can get value from this theme and you can configure, right? So technically this is going to change the appearance of any element. Validations we use this, in appearances we use this, and it is not that only when you are typing, only when you are selecting. There are so many events you can do. That means when user is typing, you can change. When user is choosing, you can change. We can apply the classes dynamically at any reference, right? So 3 reference styles are there. In that, the most commonly used reference style is this object. Object reference style allow you to turn on and off the classes. Turn on and off the classes. So this is an example again for that. This is like dark mode. I just defined dark mode, right? So same, I will use class binding dot component dot css. In class binding component CSS, we just added this dark mode theme, and class binding dot component dot HTML, and here we are applying that and displaying, and we are controlling that by using ng class. ng class is accessing the class name, and the class name is collecting a Boolean value, true or false. So based on true or false, it will decide whether to apply this class or not. You can apply multiple, or you can apply only one. Multiple just now we saw. So in validations, we can define that, right? This is technically working with class binding. Class binding. So this is an example. Later in validations and everywhere we can use it, right? But already you know that what is difference between class? That means you are using div class. What is difference between class and style? both will apply effects. What is difference? Both will apply effects. Then what is difference between them? So style is inline. Style is inline. And class will come from embedded or external file. If it is embedded or external file, it will be slow. But embedded and external file are good for reusability. But problem is they are slow because they increase the number of requests. So style is inline. It is faster but not reusable. If you want some effects to any element which are not used for any another element, then you can do inline. You know already when to write inline, when to write embedded, you know the point. That means now here, if you are using inline documentation, there will be no CSS file. There will be no classes. Then what we have to do? We have to apply the styles inline. To apply the styles inline, we can just use this style. What is the concept of style? Style is used to apply the styles inline. What is the advantage of that? You can reduce the number of requests and you can improve the performance. But problem is it is not reusable. It is not reusable. Suppose you are applying effects for only one element and you don't want to reuse it, then you can go with this style. And the same thing, now here also we have ng class. Ng class is for applying any class. We have ng style. Ng style is used for applying inline styles. Inline styles. You can put styles inline, right? What is problem in inline style? Reusability issues will come. Reusability, but it is okay and good for single element. If you don't want reusability, so if you want reusability, then you have to use class. So this is called as, we call this as ng style. We call this as it is used to bind inline styles to element. So it is often often known as style binding. Style binding. What is advantage is it reduces the number of requests and improves page load time. But problem is, so it cannot allow reusability, reusing of styles. That is one problem. Because you are writing inline, it will be only for that element. You cannot reuse for other elements. That is the problem of ng style. Now we will see one example how this ng style works. ng style works. That we will see next session. Tomorrow we will do that. Right? Tomorrow we will learn about style binding. With that, we will finish about this component. Now we will go into a very big concept, the component life cycle. We will discuss about life cycle. And this is the major area where complete Angular interview happens for experienced people. That means 90% Angular interview questions will be on component life cycle. So we will discuss this detailedly in the next session. Tomorrow we'll do that. Okay.